Hi, my name is Chris Burris. I'm a longevity expert and the chief scientist at a lab focused on a longevity molecule. My primary focus is to help people live longer and better lives with science. Make sure to subscribe and share so you and your friends can live longer and better, so you and your friends can live beyond the norms.
You broke your book into two parts, right? The problems and the solutions. And when I was just glancing at this, kind of preparing for the interview, my first thought was, when I read this, I thought, the problems that cause what, right? So here's the list of the problems, but what are the problems causing? And then the solutions, what are the solutions fixing? So what would you say the problems that you're addressing, right? So we understand metabolic freedom, but what's the expression of that?
Yeah, great point. It's the causes are causing metabolic diseases, right? There's a long list that I talk about in the book. It's high blood pressure, insulin resistance, diabetes, cancer, autoimmune disease, PCOS. We could go on and on and on. These are all metabolic conditions. So those are the main causes to metabolic disease. That's the first half of the book. The second half is the solution. So you understand what's causing the problem. Okay, what can you do about it? And then it gives you the solutions chapter by chapter. One of the most interesting things that I think is in the book is the chapter that's I'm looking at the chapters here, chapter 3, where I talk about being a sugar burner. You know, this is the first step that leads towards metabolic disease, and when you're stuck burning sugar. And it really starts with insulin. When you are, and insulin, of course, is a hormone that's an energy sensor. It's vital for life. It's not a bad hormone. There are no bad hormones. God doesn't make any mistakes. Everything in our body is perfect. But sometimes a lot of the times, 93% of people do things,
approximately,
lots of times, do some things that take the body out of balance and take hormones out of balance. Insulin being one of them. Insulin is going to signal fat storage. It signals energy coming in, stored into your fat cells when there's a surplus of that energy. And it's interesting because insulin will be elevated as the first domino to fall before all of the other things start to happen. For example, we talk about fasting blood sugar and testing your blood sugars in general via like A1C, which is the 3-month measure of your blood sugars. But all of that actually doesn't change for 6 to 14 years on average, even with insulin resistance. Meaning there's some studies in the book that I referenced that you could have full-blown insulin resistance for 6 to 14 years with your blood sugars looking perfect because your pancreas is so busy producing insulin, just shouting at your cells to clear that excess blood glucose until it goes deaf to the screams. And then your blood sugars dramatically increase, which then leads to prediabetes and then diabetes, which then opens the door for cancer, heart disease, autoimmune, et cetera. So it starts with insulin. I believe the most important test you could get for your metabolism, I talk about this in the book, is a fasting insulin test. It's a blood test, and you want to see that in the single digits. That means you have sensitive levels of insulin. You're producing at the right amount, the right frequency. So that is really important because I think a lot of people maybe test their A1C, which is their 3-month average of their blood sugar, or their fasting blood glucose with their annual report or annual doctor's visit, but they're not testing their fasting insulin. So I encourage those watching and listening, please, at least once a year, test your fasting insulin. It'll give you a lot of clues to which direction you need to go towards.
Would you recommend fasting insulin separate from maybe a continuous glucose monitor, or will both of those tell you kind of the same thing?
It's different, although a continuous glucose monitor is a great idea. I talk about the value of it in the book. The continuous glucose monitor is not going to show you what your insulin levels are. It can give you an idea, and I'll explain how it can give you an idea. But for those who don't know, a continuous glucose monitor is a device that you typically attach to the back of your tricep, and you wear it for 14 days, and it gives you 24/7 look at your blood glucose levels. You scan it with your phone, and it tells you exactly what your blood sugars are without having to prick your finger. So that's the advantage. It's not showing you your blood insulin. Now, I am praying that sometime soon they'll create a continuous insulin monitor. That would be amazing. Yeah. But right now that we only have continuous glucose. So it's not giving you insulin, but here's what you can do with the continuous glucose monitor to see if you have insulin resistance. It'll give you clues. You test your what's called postprandial glucose. Postprandial means after eating. You first test your blood glucose with your continuous glucose monitor or finger prick right before you eat a meal. So you're fasted. Let's say it's 85 milligrams per deciliter, which is good. It's an amazing fasting blood glucose. You eat your meal. 2 hours later, test your blood sugars again via the CGM or the finger prick and see where it's at. What you want to see, here's a sign of somebody who's insulin sensitive. You want to see your blood sugar levels back down to around 85 2 hours after eating, 90, 85, around that level, close to the baseline. If you don't see that, if your blood sugar levels are 120, 130, 140 or higher 2 hours after eating, that's a huge sign that you have insulin resistance. Your body is not producing enough insulin. It's the beta cells are burnt out, and you definitely got to go get a fasting insulin test done, because that fasting glucose should be similar to the 2 hour postprandial glucose. So if you're not seeing that, that could be a problem. Now, in the early stages, this is more towards the later stages of insulin resistance. In the early stages, you might notice this. You might notice that 2 hours after eating, you're hypoglycemic, 60 milligrams per deciliter or 55. That's also a sign of insulin resistance, but the early stages where you're producing too much. So it's really the food you're eating will create that response. So you could change the food you're eating and then test again to see what foods have a better response. And you're going to find that it's going to be low carb, keto, carnivore sort of foods that get you the best response.
And when you check your insulin levels, does it matter? Does that need to be fasted? Does that matter? I mean, it's probably prescribed when you're going in to get that test.
Fasted. Yeah, you want to be 12 to 14 hours fasted. It needs to be a fasted insulin test. You don't want to do it too much into a fast. You want to do it around 12 to 14 hours into a fast. So if you're done eating at 7 p.m., you want to make your doctor's appointment the next morning at 8 a.m. or 9 a.m., which is around 13, 14 hours fasting.
It's kind of interesting. I went to for my healthcare practitioner visit, yearly visit, and they asked, like, "Are you fasted?" And it's just kind of fun to say, "Usually."
No big deal. Yep. 20, you should say something like, "Yep, 36 hours into a fast." What? Oh my gosh.
So you talk in your book about flex days, and I actually spoke with a mutual friend of ours, Robert Sykes, right, the keto savage.
Yeah.
And he's been in straight ketosis for 11 or 12 years. What are your thoughts there?
I love Robert. Robert's a great dude. Amazing. I love his keto brick. Yeah. Great guy, great information, and it's working for him. He's thriving. So, there's a lot to be said to that. And he's a bodybuilder at that, natural bodybuilder. So he's incredible. But Robert's not the people that I work with, the majority of the people I work with. And some people want to do that. Some people want to do keto and they want to do it for the rest of their life or do it for a very long time. And if you feel great and your lab work looks great, keep doing it, right? But I have found, and I've taken 5,000-6,000 people through different keto protocols, that the majority of them, like 95% plus, need to have these flex days. And flex days are essentially, and look, it gets confused because when I talk about flexing out of ketosis, you're going from very low carbohydrate diet, which is a keto diet, under 50 grams of carbs total per day, to a flex day, which is still a low carbohydrate diet. It's 100 to 150 grams of carbs. It's not a high carbohydrate diet. It's still low carb, but you're intentionally getting yourself out of ketosis when the time is right to do so. I believe it has many benefits for metabolic flexibility. For women, it transforms their hormones, especially menstruating women, helps them build progesterone and estrogen, especially the week before their period. Transformational for them. And it just helps with like thinking about the long-term solution, meaning you don't have to be as restrictive. You could have these flex days during an event, a wedding, a party. I'm intentional with the language that I use. I call them feast days or flex days. I don't call them cheat days. It's healthy carbohydrates. It's still low carb, just not low carb enough to be in ketosis. So Robert might disagree. And look, there's different ways to flex, by the way. And Robert has I've spoken to him about this before. We've lectured on different stages. You could flex with a high calorie, high protein day and still get a similar effect. So there's different ways to do this. But I have found that most people love the flex days. I personally love the flex days. And we're not flexing if you're still type 2 diabetic or insulin resistance. We're doing it at a certain point when we feel like the time is right to do that flex.
Well, yeah, and I think the flex day also just speaks to kind of human nature and how good are we at depriving. And, he is a bodybuilder, right? And so he's depriving himself regularly. And so that's just very natural for him. So, but I just thought it was interesting as I was preparing for that interview. It's like, wait a minute. Ben says like you shouldn't be in ketosis all the time. And it depends on the person.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Live Beyond the Norms podcast. Make sure to subscribe and follow. Also, make sure not to be that guy, the guy sharing this podcast with people who are not interested in living beyond the norms. If you would like to learn more about the ESS60 molecule, the molecule responsible for the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history, a full 90% extension of life, visit myvitalc.com. That's myvitalc as in carbon.com.